What if the person you sleep beside is the reason you've stopped sleeping at all? You give, you stay, you try harder, telling yourself, maybe I just need to be more patient, more understanding. But deep down, something's off. Not loud, not obvious, just a quiet unease you can't quite name. And slowly, you feel it, you're losing yourself, you're showing up for her, but somewhere along the way you stopped showing up for you. Somewhere in the silence between her, words and your sacrifices, doubt creeps in. You start questioning your own judgment, your own memories, your own peace. And here's the thing, it doesn't start with yelling. It doesn't even start with obvious mistreatment. It starts with softness, with vulnerability, with stories about how everyone else did her wrong, and somehow, without realizing it, you feel responsible for fixing what someone else broke. Some women bring light the moment they walk into a room. Others, the moment they leave, the room starts to feel bright again. Before you mistake this for bitterness, this isn't about blame. It's not about hate or resentment. It's about clarity, the kind that takes time, pain, and experience to earn, because not every woman who wants you is good for you, and not every love story leads to peace. Today, we're going to uncover 7 subtle but powerful signs you may be standing beside the wrong woman, someone who's slowly draining your emotional stability while calling it love. Stay until the end, because sign number 7, most men don't recognize it until it's already cost them years they'll never get back. And if you've ever had to walk away from someone you once thought was the one, just type clarity in the comments below. I read every single one, and trust me, you're not alone. If any part of this feels familiar, you're not crazy, you're just waking up. Let's talk about what that really looks like. You know how it starts. She opens up to you about her past, not just casually, but deeply, emotionally, vulnerably. And at first, it's moving. She tells you how she was wronged, how people misunderstood her, how her kindness was taken for granted. Her ex was selfish, her co-workers gossiped, her family never supported her. The world, it seems, has been against her from the beginning. And you, being the man you are, you listen, you lean in. You start to think maybe she just needs someone who won't let her down. Maybe you're the first man who will treat her the way she truly deserves. That's the hook. And that's where a lot of good men get pulled in. It doesn't feel like manipulation at first. It feels like connection. It feels like trust. She's opening her heart. She's giving you access to the real her. And it feels good to be needed, to be the safe place she's never had before. But time reveals patterns that charm can't hide forever. As the months go by, the stories keep coming. And they all follow the same storyline. She's the victim, always. Every chapter of her life features someone who mistreated her, misunderstood her, or failed to show up. And strangely, none of those relationships ever ended because of something she did. That's when something inside you begins to shift. You start to feel the weight of all those stories pressing down on you. You're no longer just her partner. You've become her therapist, her emotional cushion, her constant source of reassurance. Tom was a man like that, level-headed, thoughtful, the kind of guy who doesn't quit easily. After his divorce, he met a woman who seemed refreshingly open. She told him everything, the heartbreaks, the betrayals, the pain. At first, he felt honored that she trusted him. He thought, this is what intimacy looks like. But what he didn't see right away was that the intimacy was one-sided. The openness wasn't a door, it was a script, one he wasn't writing, just acting in. And soon the role shifted. If he disagreed with her perspective, he was insensitive. If he asked her to take responsibility, he was just like the rest. He found himself apologizing for things he didn't do, walking on eggshells, afraid that even kindness would be twisted into blame. This is the hidden danger of a woman who sees herself as a permanent victim. She refuses accountability. She will shape-shift reality, recast history, and rewrite conversations to protect the only role she knows how to play, the one where she's always the one who was hurt and never the one who did the hurting, and if you're too close, you become the next chapter in her story. That's when you have to make a choice, not out of anger, not out of judgment, but out of self-respect. You have to recognize the difference between helping someone heal and getting dragged into a story that never ends. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The woman who stays in victimhood gives that power away, and if you're not careful, she'll hand you the burden and call it love. Your job isn't to carry what she won't claim. Your job is to offer support without losing yourself, to remain kind without becoming her crutch, to love without becoming the latest reason she can't take ownership of her life. And when you realize the stories never change, that the pain always circles back to you, quietly, calmly, without drama, you walk away, not because you're cruel, but because your peace matters too, and no woman, no matter how charming, no matter how wounded, is worth the slow erosion of your own clarity. At first it feels like passion, like intensity, like fire. She's exciting, unpredictable, full of energy. Conversations turn emotional quickly, and you chalk it up to her being real or just passionate about life. There's never a dull moment with her. Every day feels like a story unfolding, but after a while that fire starts to burn you. You notice that when things are calm, when the air is peaceful, when the day goes quietly, something in her shifts. She seems uncomfortable, almost anxious, and before long, a spark turns into a fight that didn't need to happen. It might be something small. You didn't text her back quickly enough, or you were too quiet at dinner, or you didn't respond with the energy she expected. Whatever it is, it becomes a problem, and you're left trying to figure out how it got there in the first place. You explain yourself, you apologize, you try to fix what doesn't feel broken, and by the time the dust settles, you're exhausted, and somehow she seems more alive than ever. That's the thing about people who thrive on drama. It feeds them, it gives them attention, control, and emotional dominance. For them, chaos isn't something to avoid, it's something they're drawn to. Stability makes them restless. Peace feels like silence, and silence feels like abandonment. So what happens? You start walking on eggshells. You monitor your tone, your timing, your facial expressions. You become hyper-aware of how your smallest actions might be interpreted. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're no longer living in your own emotional rhythm. You're living in hers. I've known men who were strong, centered, and grounded until they got caught in this kind of emotional weather. One man, a former Marine, told me how his girlfriend would blow up over things as simple as him turning the TV on during her story. Another told me how his partner would storm out of restaurants over small misunderstandings, only to return later, with tears and a new list of reasons why it was all his fault. When you're in it, it's confusing. You keep thinking, if you could just do better, love harder, or explain yourself more clearly, the storms would stop. But they don't, because the storm isn't about the weather. It's about her need to be in the center of the room, emotionally. Seneca once said, "An angry man opens his mouth and shuts his eyes." That's what drama does. It blinds, it blocks reason. And when a person is fueled by emotional turmoil, they're not seeking peace, they're seeking control. The only way to win in that game is not to play. You stop reacting. You stop fixing. You stop trying to pull someone towards stillness when they are addicted to noise. You stay calm. You stay grounded. You observe, but you do not participate. Because not every fire needs to be fought. Some are meant to burn out on their own. And if you're the only one bringing calm into the relationship, eventually you have to ask yourself, am I in love? Or just managing chaos? The answer may be painful, but the clarity it brings, that's where your peace begins. Guilt is a quiet manipulator. It doesn't shout. It doesn't throw dishes or slam doors. Guilt slips in through the smallest cracks. It shows up in a sigh, in a pause, in that look she gives you when you say you have plans with your brother, or when you suggest needing some time to yourself. It's not what she says, it's how she says it. Or worse, what she doesn't say at all. You'll hear something like, "No, it's fine, do what you want," but it's never fine. And the tension in her silence tells you exactly how she feels. So you cancel, you stay home, you rearrange your life in tiny ways to avoid that feeling in your chest, the one that whispers you've disappointed her again. At first, you don't even realize it's happening. You think you're just being thoughtful, loving, present, but slowly you start giving up things that matter to you, your hobbies, your friendships, your time, just to avoid that disapproving silence. That's what happened to Greg. He was a carpenter from Ohio, proud of his independence. He loved weekend fishing trips with his son and playing old records in the garage. Then he met a woman who seemed warm, affectionate, deeply connected. She said all the right things. "I love how close you are with your family," she told him. "I admire how much you love your work." But somewhere along the way, that admiration turned into quiet resentment. When he planned a weekend fishing trip, she looked disappointed and said, "I just didn't think you'd want to be away from me that long." When he stayed late at work to finish a job, she went silent for hours. "I was just missing you," she said later, "but maybe I expect too much." He began to feel torn. No matter what he did, it never felt like enough. So he gave more, gave up his Saturdays, turned down guys' nights. Slowly, almost invisibly, he became smaller in his own life. That's what guilt can do when it's used like a leash. It doesn't ask, it pulls. And the more you try to satisfy it, the tighter it wraps around your freedom. The hardest part is this: it doesn't feel like control. It feels like love, like you're choosing her, like you're making sacrifices for the sake of the relationship. But love born from guilt is not love. It's fear in disguise. You stop doing things because they bring you joy, and you start doing them because you don't want to deal with her reaction. That's when you've crossed the line. Not with her, but with yourself. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's the heart of it. When guilt decides your choices, you're no longer acting from who you are. You're reacting from who she wants you to be. Love should never come with invisible debts. When you give, it should come from strength, not fear of disapproval. So the next time you hear that sigh, or that "I guess I thought I mattered more," pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of love, or just trying not to feel guilty? Because when someone uses guilt to shape your actions, it's not affection. It's control wearing a soft face. And a man who values his peace doesn't live in someone else's emotional shadow. He stands in his own light, even if it means standing alone. Empathy isn't something you can fake. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It just shows up. It sits with you in the silence. It listens without trying to fix. It knows when to speak, and sometimes, more importantly, when not to, and when it's missing. It's not always obvious at first, not until you find yourself going through something real, something heavy, and the person you thought would be right there beside you just isn't. Not emotionally, anyway. Maybe it starts small. You come home after a long, grueling day, and all you want is someone to ask how you're holding up. But she's already talking about her own day, about what she saw on TV or what a friend texted her. You mention feeling exhausted, and she nods politely, then shifts the conversation back to herself. You tell yourself she's just distracted. You let it go, but then comes a deeper kind of pain, the loss of a loved one, a health scare, a dream that fell apart after years of hard work, and you start to notice that when you need someone, not physically but emotionally, she's nowhere to be found. She might be in the room, but you feel completely alone. That's when the silence becomes deafening. I remember a man named Ray. He was in his late 50s when his wife of 30 years passed unexpectedly. A year later, he met a woman who seemed supportive at first. She said all the right things, checked in on him, sent sweet messages. But when the grief got real, when Ray broke down, when the bad days hit him without warning, she pulled back. She grew cold. She didn't know how to sit in that kind of emotional stillness, didn't know how to hold space for something that couldn't be solved. She'd say things like, "I thought you were doing better by now," or "I don't know what to say when you're like this." Ray told me that over time he felt lonelier with her than he did when he was completely alone. And that's the truth that stings the most. Being in a relationship without empathy isn't just disappointing, it's isolating, because you expect love to show up when life gets hard, and when it doesn't, you begin to question not just the relationship, but your own worth. The thing is, empathy isn't complicated. It's not grand gestures. It's sitting with someone in their sadness without rushing to escape it. It's listening, really listening, without needing to turn the moment back on yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." I'd add this, waste no more time hoping someone will become something they've never shown themselves capable of being. If she doesn't show up when life punches you in the gut, if she pulls away when your emotions become inconvenient, if she gets uncomfortable when you open up, believe what that tells you, because storms will come for all of us. And love that can't weather a storm isn't love, it's just company. The presence of a woman who lacks empathy may fill a chair at your table, but her absence will echo through every hard moment she doesn't show up for. And a man who knows the value of peace, true peace, knows this. It's better to sit in silence alone than beside someone who can't feel the weight of your heart. You can tell a lot about someone by what they value when no one's watching. And when a woman is obsessed with appearances, what she wears, what you drive, what the neighbors think, what she can post online, it's not always obvious at first. It shows up in small moments. The way she comments on what someone else is wearing, the way she lights up when someone compliments her purse, or how her tone changes when you pull into a nice restaurant versus a casual diner. At first, you might even find it charming. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look good or enjoy the finer things, but over time, it shifts. The compliments become expectations, the lifestyle becomes pressure, and suddenly your relationship starts to feel less like a connection between two people and more like a constant audition. You find yourself second-guessing your decisions. Is this car good enough? Is that vacation impressive enough? Are your shoes on her level? You might even start thinking you're not doing well because someone else has more. And that's where the real damage happens, not in the things themselves, but in the silent message she keeps sending, "You're only valuable when you're impressive." I knew a guy named Leonard who owned a small but solid construction business. Honest work, great reputation. He was proud of what he built. Then he met a woman who turned heads. She had charm, polish, and presence. At first he felt lucky. She seemed supportive, interested, impressed by his work ethic. But as the months went by, that admiration started sounding more like criticism. She'd say things like, "We should be going to nicer places," or "Don't you want to upgrade that truck?" She wanted the lifestyle that looked good in photos. And Leonard, he started feeling like he was always one step behind. That's the problem with shallow priorities. They don't fill you, they drain you, they demand more and more, but give less and less. And worst of all, they're never satisfied. Because for someone who lives on the surface, enough is never really enough. There's always someone richer, flashier, more together. And if she's chasing that, she's not chasing connection. She's chasing status. The Stoics had a truth for this, as clear now as it was 2,000 years ago. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Think about that. Peace isn't about stacking more, it's about needing less. But a woman who's wrapped up in what things look like on the outside will never see the beauty of who you are on the inside. She won't appreciate your values, your effort, your quiet strength. She'll only see your worth in the mirror of public opinion. And if you tie yourself to that reflection, you'll forget the truth of your own value. You can't build something lasting with someone who treats love like a photo shoot. Because peace, real peace, is quiet. It doesn't need to be noticed. It just needs to be respected. And when a man builds his life on values, not vanity, he doesn't need to prove anything to the world. Least of all, to someone who can't see beyond the packaging. There's something quietly painful about being in a relationship where no matter what happens, you're always the one at fault. You bring up an issue, something small, something you want to fix, not to attack her, but to grow together. You choose your words carefully. You stay calm. You come from a place of care, not criticism, but instead of a conversation, you get a deflection. The topic changes, the spotlight shifts. And suddenly, you're not talking about what went wrong. You're talking about how you made her feel uncomfortable, or how you always bring up negative stuff, or how your timing is just bad. The problem you came to solve gets buried under a pile of guilt, emotion, and blame. And guess what? You're the one apologizing by the end. That's how it works when someone can't admit they're wrong. Accountability feels like an attack, so they flip the script. They make you second-guess your tone, your timing, even your intentions. It's never about resolution. It's about protection, their protection. The longer you stay in that kind of dynamic, the more you start to shrink. You stop bringing things up. You start editing yourself. Not because everything's fine, but because it's easier to stay quiet than deal with the emotional fallout of trying to have an honest conversation. You end up walking around issues instead of through them. And without truth, there's no growth, no healing, no real connection. Truth is, admitting you're wrong takes strength. It takes humility. And a woman who can say, "You're right, I overreacted," or "I misunderstood," or even just, "I'm sorry," that's a woman who values growth over pride. But a woman who twists every disagreement into an emotional game, who uses guilt to dodge responsibility, who makes you the villain for daring to speak up, that woman isn't building with you. She's managing you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone can show me I'm wrong, I'll gladly change. For it is truth I seek, not ego." That's the kind of mindset that makes relationships last. Not perfection, not agreement on everything, just the willingness to be honest and to grow. Because when someone refuses to ever be wrong, what they're really saying is, "I care more about being right than about being close." And you can't build intimacy with a wall. You just end up loving someone from the other side of it, wondering how you got so far away while standing right next to them. You can always make more money. You can always get more things, but you can never get more time. And a woman who doesn't value your time is telling you, without saying a word, that she doesn't truly value you. It's subtle at first. She runs late. Once or twice you brush it off. Everyone gets caught up sometimes, but then she starts cancelling last minute. Plans you looked forward to for days vanish with a text. Something came up. Or worse, no message at all. You're just left waiting, checking your phone, wondering if you misunderstood. When she does show up, she's distracted. On her phone. Apologizing maybe, but only halfway. "Sorry, I lost track of time. I had so much going on." You smile and say it's okay, but inside something starts to shift. You feel like you're the only one adjusting, accommodating, rearranging your life to fit hers. That's what happened to Doug. He was a retired firefighter, simple guy. Didn't ask for much, just honesty, respect, and someone who showed up when they said they would. He met a woman who was vibrant, exciting, full of energy. At first, he thought her schedule was just busy. Then he realized something else. He was never a priority. She was always late, always rescheduling, always needing just a little more time. And he kept giving it. He missed rounds of golf with his buddies, skipped a fishing trip, pushed back dinner with his daughter, all to make room for someone who didn't respect the space he was offering. Time isn't just hours on a clock. It's your life, your breath, your attention. And when you spend it on someone who wastes it, you're not just losing minutes, you're losing moments you can't ever get back. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And too many men waste years waiting on someone who never really showed up. A woman who values your time shows up. She's present. She's consistent. She understands that being there when you say you will is a form of love, a form of respect. And when she doesn't do that repeatedly, it's not a scheduling issue. It's a values issue. If you're always the one waiting, always the one adjusting, always the one giving, ask yourself, what are you really receiving? Because a relationship should never feel like a delay. And a woman who can't respect your time will never fully respect your life. At some point you stop waiting, you stop explaining, you stop hoping she'll change, you reclaim your minutes, your calendar, your sense of worth, because time is sacred, and the right woman doesn't waste. She honors it just like she honors you. Some women bring warmth, peace, and grounding the moment they enter your life. Others bring storms that feel like passion, but leave you standing in the wreckage, wondering how you got so far from yourself. If any part of this spoke to you, if even one sign sounded a little too familiar, it's not about blame. It's not about regret. It's about finally seeing clearly you are not cruel for choosing clarity. You are not selfish for protecting your time, your peace, your emotional sanity. You are wise. And sometimes wisdom looks like walking away from what you once thought was love, because there is life after heartbreak. There is peace after confusion. And yes, there is still love after loss, the kind of love that doesn't drain you, but builds you. So if you've seen even one of these signs in your life, past or present, comment clarity below. I read every single one. And I promise you're not the only one who's been there. If this video helped you, subscribe, share it with a friend, someone who's been giving too much to the wrong person for too long. And remember this, peace is not something you stumble into. It's something you guard. It's something you choose. And it's something you deserve. Always.